I'm like an overgrown child. I love Mountain Dew.
This is full of Diet Coke, so.
Nice.
All right. Welcome, everyone, to the next session. We'll give you a minute to get settled, get pushed in, and then we'll go ahead and start this session. So, all right. Thank you all for joining us for That's a Wrap, Nailing the POC Wrap-Up with Dwayne Hoover. My name is Katie McCurdy. I'm a Client Success Manager at Consensus, and I'll be your moderator for today's session. DemoFest is presented by Consensus. Consensus is leading the world into a new era of demo automation. Our platform gets your buyers what they need when they need it. It then multiplies your revenue team's impact with unique insights on those buyers. As a result, you see faster close times, larger deals, and higher close rates. You can learn more at goconsensus.com or view the automated micro demo at the link in the Docs tab on the right of your screen. We encourage you to participate in today's session. On the right of your console, you can see a few ways to engage with us throughout the session. I'm sure you've heard a bunch of these already, but the chat function will allow you to engage with us as well as other attendees. And then we will be taking questions from the audience at the end of the session, but we encourage you to ask questions at any time through the Q&A box. If at any time you are having technical difficulties, head to the gear on the bottom of your screen. There you'll see a help document to help troubleshoot common issues. And now I'd like to introduce our speaker. Dwayne Hoover is a technical pre-sales veteran who has guided companies from early stage to IPO and acquisition. He's led a global pre-sales team and post-sales team ranging from 1 to 100 people globally with very specialized and technical teams. He's extremely data-driven and maniacal about processes and repeatability. And with that, I will turn the rest of the time over to you, Dwayne.
All right. Thank you, Katie. All right. Let me get my presentation shared here and we'll get started. There we go. I swear I've done live demos before. All right. So today we're going to be talking about the POC wrap up, right? What do you do when your technical validation event is over and you need to maximize the value that you're showing to the stakeholders and the folks that are responsible for purchasing your product. So before we get started on that, just a quick intro to me and what I'm doing. So native of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania area. I've got a family of 3 kids, wife, and a tiny little cavapoo named Boba that follows me around everywhere. Professionally, spent the first 10-ish years of my career I think this is a pretty common pattern for sales engineers and technical pre-sales folks. I spent the first part of my career as a proper kind of core engineer and quickly realized that maybe I'm a little more extroverted than I gave myself credit for, and was introduced to technical pre-sales, and it fit like a glove and have never looked back. Happy to connect with anyone on LinkedIn if you want to know more, but this session isn't about me. It's about other more important things. I do want to talk briefly about Anjuna, the company that I'm currently at, just because a lot of the examples in the presentation today will kind of circle back and reference some of the things that Anjuna does and how we do our POC wrap-ups. This is a pattern. It's kind of a tried and true method that I've been using for quite some time. I mean, there have been lots of modifications and iterations to it over the years. But this is sort of what we've been doing. The company itself, and we're not going to do a deep dive on confidential computing, but Anjuna is a software provider that helps people adopt confidential computing. We're kind of that cliche easy button for confidential computing. And I bring that up because going the DIY route with it is tough, and it's really hard to do it the right way if you take the DIY route. So that's, our primary competition is the DIY methodology, and we'll highlight that as we go through some of the slides here. All right, so quick agenda. So a couple themes I want to keep in mind here as we go through this. I want you to just constantly think about who will consume the POC wrap up presentation, right? Who's going to put their eyeballs on it? Who will it influence? Because across the session today, we're going to talk a bit about the audience that you're serving with this type of asset. Another thing too, we're going to talk about value a lot. So if you're familiar with value selling or MEDDIC, BANT, like a lot of the qualification frameworks, and that's a primary driver for how you build this POC wrap up. And I also, I have an example. I've got a bunch of examples that we use in real life at Anjuna. However, always, in the back of your head, I want you to keep thinking, how would I make this mine, right? Every company's different, every product's different, every sales cycle is different, whether it's PLG, enterprise sales, whatever it might be. This is definitely a your mileage, may vary scenario. So keep in mind that creativity is always allowed here. And I'll reference it. The technical validation event, we're going to talk about it. I typically call them POCs, proof of concept. I know some folks call it a POV, technical validation, whatever your naming is, and we could probably talk for an hour about what's a POC, what's a POV, what's the difference, but that's not the topic, and that can turn into a pretty heated debate here. So let's move on. So I kind of laughed about this a little bit because I'm putting together a presentation, I'm putting together a slide deck about a deck, right? And it's kind of meta, but the reality of it is, at the end of a validation event, you want to have an asset that you can provide to your potential buyers and the people that are close to those buyers, right? The folks in other departments or other technical stakeholders that maybe you haven't interacted with during the POC. It should also be a complete tale, a story, right? And we'll definitely look at a lot of samples about this, but it should be a complete record of what you've done, and not just for the proof of concept exercise, but for the entire sales cycle. Who have you met with? What are your timelines? What are next steps? What's your implementation plan? I have spent a fair amount of my career in dual roles where I was covering both pre-sales and post-sales, and it's important to the customer and to the company that you're employed at to have that right plan in place and prove that you've thought about it, and there's a plan for success in front of everyone that's involved. I highlighted this one in bold because this is extremely important, and this is something that I probably get a little annoying about with beginner or junior SEs on my team, and with a lot of the AEs and folks that I interact with. This might be your last chance to sell, and you could be selling to people you haven't met yet, right? So you think about it. If I run a successful POC with a large enterprise and we put a $500,000 proposal in front of them, they're probably going to have to ask for permission to buy that, right? So when you put together your wrap-up presentation, document, whatever it might be, that's going to go to someone else, right? So you're not going to have control over who sees this, right? Maybe it's a live presentation that you're doing. That recording could go to procurement, could go to a CFO. So you always have to be aware of new folks that might see what you've put together and have an opinion about what you've done and whether or not this is valuable without directly speaking with you. And that's going to be, again, one of the big themes that we double down on here. Also, from a post-sales perspective, yes, I'm biased because I have run pretty large service delivery teams in my past, but having that complete picture as something you can just hand over to the post-sales team is a fantastic way to get started. And it definitely saves you time from, scheduling meetings to walk through everything we did. It's all right there in front of them for, their consumption to work on the post-sales implementation. Another piece too, and this happens often where, let's say you did 30, 40, 50 deals in a quarter, and I don't know, your CEO or other folks at the company are asking, hey, what did we do for this company? This new customer, that's awesome. I can't believe we landed that account. What was the use case? Instead of spending your time writing up, responding to Slacks or emails or writing up documentation about use cases, you'll have it all ready and prepared and good to go for the folks that are interested. But before we jump into the details, I tell a story often to folks. I once hired somebody because of a POC wrap up, and when I'm interviewing, when I'm recruiting, one of the things that I do is like the second or third step of the process is request a live demo. And, it doesn't matter. It could be the product you're currently selling if you're, at a different company, or I actually had someone demo, this is back as how old I am, but when 3D printing first became a thing, he actually did a video demo of how to 3D print things and walk through kind of the software and all that stuff. But my goal with that is to see, how do you express value? How do you sell something and talk about features and functionality and do it in a compelling way that makes me want to buy it? So I was interviewing a gentleman named Andy for a previous company that I was at. And when I asked him about the live interactive demo, he asked, can I do a POC wrap up? And I was like, absolutely. So he walked me through a POC wrap up that he had put together. I mean, anonymized it and scrubbed it and whatever, but he walked me through from start to finish the story of the sales cycle. He had a demo portion as well where he showed the use cases in the slide deck, jumped over to a live environment, was able to show that value, right? Those use cases being satisfied live. And it was just a pure mastery of how you're supposed to do this, at least, in my opinion. And it was a no-brainer. I mean, he was awesome as, technically and everything else all lined up. But when that was shown back to me, made my decision super easy. So little tip, if you're interviewing and someone asks you to demo, POC wrap-up's a good place to go. All right, so let's jump into the nuts and bolts now. So if we take a look at the POC wrap up as a full product, you want to start before you wrap up. And I know that might sound a little bit counterintuitive, but the benefit here is you have a template. You have a place to collect your metrics and your data points, and you can measure the timeline and all the things that are going to be parts of this POC wrap up. But the second that you get line of sight to a proof of concept exercise happening, right? The deal's qualified. You're ready to go. Start it. And these are all things that you should be collecting anyways, right? If you're working with a experienced AE team, I have an example on the screen right now. It's kind of a classic 4-box where you have a current state, a future state, the required capabilities of the product that's going to solve their problems, and then the metrics that need to be satisfied in order to make that buying decision. These are things that guide not only the POC plan, but how you're going to ultimately turn this into a sales motion, right? That you're going to present back to folks at the prospect site. Oops, let me jump over to the next one. Actually, let's go back. So I do want to one quick thing to highlight as well, and we'll talk about this in subsequent slides here. But if you look at the success metrics, a lot of this is going to be data driven, right? So there are scenarios where certain products kind of lend to this, right? To getting these metrics and defining them out of the gate. Others don't. Confidential computing, for example, is a very new kind of niche technology. So a lot of the metrics that we measure during our POCs are there's some assumptions that are made, right? And some data points that we've gathered from our own engineering folks and our own product folks. But setting this stage early is important, right? Because before you even start the POC, you can use a 4-box like this to kind of gut check your prospect and just verify that if I show you a 50% reduction in this, is that enough for you to purchase, right? You can ask those hard questions. I like using something like this in a live session prior to POC planning as a, and even leading off with, this is what we heard. Correct me if I'm wrong, right? It's a great way to get information and the qualifying metrics that you need in order to make a deal. My background, at least over the last decade and a half or so that I've been doing technical pre-sales, I've been primarily in medic shops, so medic, med pick, things like that. There are other qualification frameworks and other sales methodology frameworks that you might be using, but at the end of the day, they all require some level of metrics, right? I mean, it's literally the M in medic is metrics. So part of the reason why you want to set that expectation up front is finding out what metrics are important to your prospect and what will ultimately guide their buying decision. In this scenario, just a quick example table up there, increase deployment efficiency by 50%, reduce critical vulnerabilities by 25%. Yeah, they're generic, and obviously your product will lend to having different types of metrics that you're going to measure as part of the proof of concept. But including those early and having kind of a clear direction of the results that you're going to provide back to your prospect ultimately make the POC go smoother. And it's something that is extremely important in the POC wrap-up plan. Also, well, going back to the numbers, I will show you a slide or two on TCO and ROI. It's impossible to calculate TCO or ROI without numbers. So always keep in the back of your mind, what can I measure during this proof of concept that will lend to the ultimate kind of presentation saying, yes, you're going to give us $100,000, but you're going to save $300,000 in engineer cost or, time to market, things like that. The other piece too is I look at quotes or just general feedback from our prospects as a metric, as something that you can put into a POC wrap up. It is a data point, right? You're using that prospect's words to share back with them and their peers how much they loved their interaction with you, like how much better their product is making their life, or how much better your product is making their lives. If you think about it, let's say you're working with an engineer, her name's Lisa. She says something like, hey, Anjuna's sea glass is phenomenal, right? And you take that quote down, you incorporate that into your POC wrap up. And then Bob in procurement gets a hold of that POC wrap up, and you've never met Bob. You don't know Bob. Bob doesn't know anything about your product, but what Bob does know is that Lisa is an absolute total rock star and he values her opinion, right? So instead of Bob pushing for a 20% discount, Bob might push for a 10% discount. Again, circling back to, you never know whose eyes are going to be on that POC wrap up. And you're selling to people you haven't met yet. So a quick note about the POC plan, and I know the font is small and this might be a little bit hard to read, but there are a couple things here. So POC plans, POV plans, whatever success criteria you're working with will differ by product, and there's obviously no easy button for it. It could be many different forms, right? But we use a spreadsheet, but we could use a slide deck, a document, and there are a lot of purpose-built tools for stuff like this, where it's a platform that your prospects can log in and you can work on the success criteria together. You can kind of rank and determine how important they are, if there are any changes or comments about it. So do your research, find out what platform works best for you. Typically, spreadsheets work pretty well for us. But But the one thing I do really want to iterate here, or emphasize on this one, is going back to the value comments I was making earlier. And I could do an entire half-day workshop on lockout documents and creating, POC plans that simply cannot lose. I think maybe next demo fest I'll propose something like that. But in this scenario, we build our POC plans with lockout criteria, and I've highlighted a few of those with green boxes where there are certain things, and again, I'm not going to get into a technical deep dive on Anjuna and what we do, but there are certain things that we do that is extremely difficult to do if you go DIY. And we do have some competition in the space as well that don't offer similar functionality, right? It's extremely important. Highlight that, have that in your POC plans. Make sure that there's zero chance that you're going to lose this POC, right? Get the technical win, get the customer sign off on these success criteria, make sure your lockout criteria are in there. And at the end of the day, even if you don't close the deal, the SE team still gets the technical win on it. But these success criteria will also guide how you tell that story back after the POC is done, when you do your wrap up. All right, so I have some examples here. These slides are from a template that my team uses, that we put together for our prospects when we wrap up a POC. Again, like we've iterated through this a few times. Your mileage may vary. There's a lot of room for creativity here, and there are a lot of slides, but we're going to go through a lot of them pretty quickly because it's more of a guide, more of a template, less of a deep dive into Anjuna and what we do. So first things first, and again, a lot of these I'm going to click through pretty quickly here, but obviously give them an outline. The executive summary, extremely important, right? So the first thing you want to do, because you got to think about attention spans as kind of a bell curve, right? I guess it'd be an upside down bell curve. Where beginning of a presentation or when you first sit down to start reading a book, those first couple pages you're going to ingest, and then you might drift off a little bit and then come back and then maybe drift off again. So you really want to set the stage early, right? Talk about kind of like the TLDR. This is the abstract. This is why you're even talking to us, right? This wrap up doc is not for the technical stakeholders you did the POC with. It's for their bosses. It's for Bob in procurement. It's for the CFO. So you want to set the stage, tell the complete story, talk about why company A even reached out to you to evaluate your software. And then give kind of the really quick summary of why you're great, right? In this one, it's Anjuna is a market leader in confidential computing. Anjuna can provide blah, blah, blah. This is a bite-size value statement that someone that knows nothing about Anjuna, maybe knows nothing about confidential computing, can latch onto, and in the back of their head, they're like, oh, they're the market leader, right? Another piece as well. Again, back to the theme that this is your last chance to sell to people that maybe don't know anything about you. They don't know anything about your product. Again, I'm going to go back to Bob in procurement. Bob doesn't know anything about confidential computing. So what I'm going to give Bob are some very hand-selected slides from your standard kind of marketing deck, your first meeting deck that you might put in front of new prospects, right? Set the stage. What is confidential computing? What can you do with confidential computing? Another kind of filler on what it is and what it can build for you. Talk about why it's a problem, right? Make some references. Talk about actual studies that happened. This is one I just started to throw in recently where we have some feedback from our customer base now about what it's done for them, right? 10x performance gains, 3x growth, whatever metrics you can kind of put in as a high level use case early on in a deck like this only helps explain how valuable you are to people that know nothing about you. Another one for the security geeks in the room. Talk about some of the other areas that you might be able to save them money, right? In this case, what we do eliminates a bunch of security threats. Here's proof, right? This is what we can eliminate for you out of the box. People spend a lot of money trying to protect their systems. Then a couple more kind of marketing focused slides, and then one that gets a little bit technical, just talking about the platform and how it's deployed. The whole point of this, again, I'll go back to it. You're selling to some folks that don't know you. They might not know anything about your technology. This is your last shot to get folks that haven't been part of the POC exercise to actually know what you do, or at least have a pretty good idea of what their company is going to spend a lot of money on. I like to throw like a roadmap slide in there as well, just to let other folks know that, hey, this is what's coming up, and if those things align with something that they're thinking about, next quarter or next year, it's important to throw that in there too. All right. So telling the story. You want to talk about your partnership. These next couple slides, they are meant to be a bit of a framework around how to tell the story, how to shape the use case, how to talk about what you've done and why it was successful, and tie back to some of the metrics that you talked about earlier. There's definitely a lot of room here for creativity and modification, right? That there are a couple of different examples of kind of a similar slide. But you want to talk about the teams, right? Talk about who was part of this, right? So CFO, COO, whoever's looking at this presentation can reference back to, the stakeholders from their own company that were part of this if they have questions. And then talk a bit about the actual timeline of the engagement. This is huge. If your company, or if your product, if one of your value drivers is time to value, this is extremely important, right? We met 3 months ago. We started the POC 2 months ago. We finished the POC in a week, and here we are now. That's a very, very compelling argument, right? That we're one of our customers right now. It's one of the 4 major credit card companies, and we were in the middle of a POC, ran into a bunch of network security problems on their side. They needed to submit some tickets to get things fixed, unblocked. And it ultimately took us about 3 weeks to do a POC that probably should have taken us a couple days. By the end of that POC, the end of the 3 weeks, our technical stakeholder from the credit card company said to us, "I can't believe how fast this was. This is the fastest POC that we've ever done here," right? To us, we're like, "Oh man, I so wish this was going quicker. I can't believe it's taken us this long." But highlighting that time to value, in some scenarios, even if it's not aligning with how quick you thought things should go, it really goes a long way, right? And then reiterating the 4 box. I had that in the kind of setup slide earlier, but this one, again, extremely important. I can't understate how important just parroting back to your prospect and the stakeholders outside of the group you're working with about the problem, right? Your understanding of their problem and how the future is going to be amazing for them. And these are the metrics, right? This is very, very important. These next 2 slides. Oh, wait, no. This is still kind of high level, setting the stage stuff. You want to convey early on in the presentation, like, what are the use cases that you tested, right? And this isn't kind of a deep dive into the POC, but let's say you're trying to increase developer efficiency. You sell a code generation AI tool, something like that. You want to talk about the problems that you're going to solve, and you can do it in more of a narrative fashion. I think that's why this slide's in here. But some of the questions that you want to try to answer here is, why do you want to fix this? Why is it important right now? And why is, in this case, Anjuna, but why is the product you're selling the one that's the right one to do it, right? Set that stage tied to a more specific use case, more specific metric, something that you're going to talk a little bit more about later in the deck. as a proof point. There we go. That's just a sample slide for the quote. So yeah, huge fan of this. I was skeptical at first, but I had a CRO years ago that made me do this. He wrote down a bunch of quotes that people were saying during the POC, and he's like, Dwayne, put this in the deck, put a little star around it, do a screenshot with this quote. And I was like, this is the dumbest thing I've ever heard. But the reality of it is, it carries a lot of weight when you're putting your words back, you're putting your prospects' words, back in front of them, right? And they can take a trip down memory lane and remember, yes, that was easy. All right. So incorporating the POC into the wrap up, the POC wrap up plan, right? This is probably the bulk of the material. This is the kind of the meat of the POC plan. So I have a couple opinions on how use cases are demonstrated in the POC plan or the POC wrap up. You do want to keep it pretty straightforward, pretty high level, right? But if you're selling a really complex technical product, this can be difficult to convey. I don't love this format of the slide, how this one is laid out, but what I do like about it is it kind of shows the journey, and it ties it back to the 4-box, right? The current state, future state, and you can tie in some metrics on this one as well. So the suggestion here is pretty simple, digestible version of the objective, right? And this is easier for products that aren't super technical. This can be a challenge for products that are really deep in the weeds. So you really got to, be creative here. I would recommend, working with your marketing folks if you're having trouble kind of distilling your value message or the spirit of the use case down to something a little more digestible. But what you're showing is, this is the capability that we mapped out earlier that you wanted to, that you require from our product. This is how we tested it. This is the result, right? Another potential, and a lot of times we'll include both of these just based on how our product is deployed. And we typically do work with stakeholders or decision makers, even outside of the POC group, that are a little more technical. So if you know your audience and then your audience that's a step or two above, get in the weeds. It's fine. Because Bob in procurement, if he's not technical, he's probably just going to click through this one anyways. But throw in some architecture diagrams, show them how it's going to be deployed. Anything you can do to kind of make it appear as easy as it actually is, right? So my product will be deployed like this. This is what it's going to do for you, right? And then, include the success criteria, include the metrics here, but you can talk, it's okay to get a little bit deeper in a POC wrap up, because I know I keep referencing Bob in procurement, but there could be 15 other, directors of engineering for different other groups that will get their eyes on this as well. And they might have use cases for your next deal, right? Think about the second deal, the upgrade, the upsell. It's okay to be technical in these documents. The other component too, and I meant to put a screenshot of the annotations in it. Anyway, I worked for a company called, I worked at Sumo Logic early on, and if you're familiar, if you're not familiar, it's a machine data observability company. We were competing with Splunk and Elastic and some of the other big players in that market. One of the things that we did, and this references back to the sales leader I was talking about earlier, is we would take screenshots and annotate them, right? Initially I thought it was a little bit hokey, but the reality of it is there were dashboards or analytics that our prospects were trying to get that they were having trouble getting out of other tools. we would put a screenshot of that and mark it up. We had some advanced features around anomaly detection, outlier detection, stuff like that. And that usually would garner some pretty good quotes from our prospects. So we would put those quotes on those screenshots, right? Video is huge as well, right? Granted, a little harder to kind of print that out or, just have it as a PowerPoint or PDF that someone has in their inbox. But if you have videos that show the efficiency of your product, shows the value of your product, especially if there are videos that show it related directly to the use cases that you were measuring during your proof of concept, that's gold, right? Because we live in the era now where people don't want, they might not be as inclined to read, but given kind of a quick 45-second or couple minute video, it carries a lot of weight. We do this a lot at Anjuna with the video recap, because our product prevents an attack of memory, and it's a lot easier and a lot more compelling to show that in video, right? Because I can mimic behaving like the hacker. I can go in, dump memory, and pull all kinds of like keys and passwords out of it. Screenshots of that just look like a bunch of command line garbage. In video, you can actually have a narrative, have a conversation about it, and walk the stakeholders through what they're actually seeing. All right, and then if possible, include the complete POC plan as part of the POC wrap up. This is important for a couple different reasons. You can show success, right? I probably should have marked a few of these boxes as complete. They're all awaiting review. But at the end of the day, if you have the full-on guide, again, Bob from procurement might not care. The folks that are in engineering leadership and other groups will care, because they can see, oh, you guys actually tested this during the POC. We're interested. Let's talk about getting some licenses. This might be an appendix if your POC plan is 50, 100 success criteria, which I hope it's not, because that's too many. You might want to put that in as an appendix, or maybe just a link to the POC plan itself. But if you can include kind of the key things that you measured and you were successful with, or even things you might have had a little bit of challenge with, it carries a lot of weight. And then timeline. I mentioned doing some level of timeline work early with kind of the overall sales cycle. Like what does that sales cycle, what did that entire sales cycle look like from the day you met them at RSA or reInvent or however they entered the top of the funnel, but also showing how quickly the POC progressed really kind of hammers home the time to value driver here. So this one, it's not exaggerative, right? So it's day 14. We typically wrap up our POCs in a couple of weeks. That's how easy it is to deploy what we sell. So we aggressively, when we set up POCs, we'll get folks to commit to like every other day working sessions, or we'll come to you and we'll knock this out in a day. So if you can highlight just how easy, how efficient, how fast something is, do it, right? And visually as a timeline, just it resonates really well with prospects. All right, so getting into the proving the value portion of this. So once you've already told the story, the POC was great. This is what we tested for. These are the use cases. Here's some diagrams. Now it's important to kick it into, now we need to sell, and we need to convince our prospect that we're worth every dollar you're going to spend on us, if not more, right? So this section probably is one of the more creative sections, right? Because every product's different. You may be selling into an industry that's, there might be Gartner reports that have, if you do this, you'll save this, or you can save this much time doing this. If you're selling into more of a niche market, you might not have the value driver, the value measurements that you would need to put this piece together. But I will, before we jump into this section, one of the things that I get a little bit neurotic about with my teams and the AEs that I work with are, if you don't have this defined out of the gate, right? If you don't have your metrics defined, if you're not able to at least have a mental calculation of what value looks like for your prospect, that the deal just simply isn't qualified, right? It isn't. And it's probably a scenario where you shouldn't spend your time doing a POC, right? So when you get to this point of the POC wrap up, this is all research that you should have already done. You should already have some spreadsheets and some calculations in mind about what you want to show at the end of it all. But you know, I'll ask the group here. I mean, if something wasn't valuable, would you buy it? You know, probably not. I mean, there are, like, larger organizations have teams and they have consultants that come in to do value engineering. That's a real thing. You know, I know, like, smaller companies, smaller startups, you're not going to have value engineers, but you can work with your product and your engineering folks to figure out what those numbers might look like, right? Put a number to the value that your product brings. That was a big challenge for us here at Injuna because it is a fairly new thing, and there weren't many people that have previously done confidential computing, but it's starting to become a regulation in some countries, and it's getting a lot of attention in financial services. So now we need to go sell it. But when we're trying to convey the value at the end, it can be difficult. Here's how we approach it. Now, this slide is ugly as sin. I can say that because I made it. Marketing does owe me a cleaned up version of this, but just we're not going to go through all the components of this one. But this was meant to visually represent the DIY effort versus using our runtime. And the scale's a little messed up, but if you look at it, like, the boxes on the left for DIY are month 1 to 2, month 3 to 4, and then the boxes on the right hand side with the Injuna CGLAS runtime is week 1, week 2, week 3. And this isn't just stuff that we made up, right? We spent a lot of time with our engineers kind of mapping out, if you were to take an application that looked like this and you wanted to put it in confidential computing without using Injuna, how long would it take? And then we got a lot of market verification from this as well, because what we've seen is that a lot of our existing customer base has tried to do this on their own, and they've either failed miserably or it took so much effort that they're like, we're not going to do that again. Please help us out. So we continually track these types of metrics internally, right, to see, you know, how valuable are we, right? It's almost like a validation of what we're doing. But you know, these are the steps that most engineering teams would need to follow to do what we can do in 3 weeks. And this is really a 1.5 year timeline that a lot of our existing customer base kind of embarked on, and realize that this really is hard as hell. And you know, we'd rather have you guys do it for us. And then just to kind of round things out, you know, at the end of any good POC wrap-up deck, you're always going to have, you know, that slide I just showed you, some level of kind of validation, some level of proof of value, and it'll be different, obviously, for every product. But the kind of the key points here are, you know, defensible metrics, right? You're selling your product more broadly than just what you covered in the use cases of the POC at this point, right? So you want to talk about customer use cases, customer stories. There was a slide at the beginning in the template that I pulled up that showed 3x growth, 90% reduction, things like that. So real use cases, real customer stories, and you know, you can even reiterate some of the metrics from the POC here as well. But this is your chance to say, okay, this is what we did. It was successful. You see the green boxes in the POC plan, and these are what our other customers are seeing, right? And then turning that into something a little more kind of defensible and consumable around, real dollars. I don't have slides for this because, like I said, every product's different. But when you start to gather metrics like, I can save 50% of my developers' time on this, or I could get products out to market 3 weeks faster. Taking those numbers and turning it into actual ROI, it's a winner. Because remember, Bob in procurement, he'll spend $100,000 if something will save the company 300,000, right? So this is your chance to really make that obvious and make it kind of front and center here. Customer quotes, super important. We talked about that. And, one of the, I can be annoying at times with the AEs that I'm working with and my SE team, but I really do mean it if you start this before you kick off the POC, it makes for an extremely smooth session, right? It makes for a really smooth technical validation exercise where you have the template, you have everything, you have the guide, the map to start collecting everything you need. And it makes it a lot easier to circle back. If you realize, oh, I'm not collecting a metric about AWS spend, well, we should go back and add that into the POC plan or work it into the overall result. With the proposed, I think, we just talked about this, but we're not going to get into actual, pricing and packaging. That's obviously a completely different topic here. But as you kind of tie it off, the things that you want to reiterate, right, is what does post-sales success look like? How will this product get implemented after we pay you money for your licenses, right? And the other kind of key point here as well, and this is something a lot of the most successful CROs that I've worked with have kind of hammered in or just beat on the sales teams about, but extreme discounting, it weakens value, right? So if you know that you're selling something and it's going to require a lot of professional services or a lot of post-sales effort to get it implemented, and you have a PS line on your quote and you mark it down to $0, it's worth $0, right? So, keep in mind, and when you work with your AE teams, I know a lot of AEs and won't involve their sales engineers or technical pre-sales team in kind of the proposal creation. They should, but if you have influence, if you have input, don't be shy about saying, why are we discounting 75%? Let's figure out like a different way to present that. And then finally, we got two more. I did talk earlier too about the need to be creative, iterating, making this your own. There are a lot of different variants for this, right? I mean, we typically put it together as a PowerPoint presentation that we'll send over as a PDF. But we have had a few customers, primarily in the kind of the more legacy financial services world, that didn't want that. They wanted a actual statement of work, right? A long multi-page narrative. I felt like I was in college getting assigned a 20-page term paper. But they wanted more of a, kind of a proper statement of work or proper document. But again, you can achieve the same level of, showing your value, defending your value, talking through the use cases in a kind of a more proper document. I've also been at companies in the past as well that were kind of more of a PLG, a product-led growth environment, where if they did a trial or they did a POC, it was more of a, we signed up for this, for your free trial. Can you give us a little broader access? And, it's very low touch technical validation event. In those scenarios, a video walkthrough is often enough, right? 5-10 minutes, just talk through your value points, talk about, the success criteria that you're able to gather, and tie it back to, this is what success means to you in your words. Here's video proof that it's working. So, again, just don't be afraid to be creative with it. But they're, the key components, should always be there in whatever format that you've decided upon. And then finally, just a bit of a recap of everything here. So, the most important points are telling the whole story, right? Because you are selling to people that you haven't met yet. So it needs to be complete. Started early, definitely started early. It makes it so much easier. I've made the mistakes early in my career where we weren't documenting or, keeping tabs on the things that we should have been the way we should have been. So, 11th hour, you're scrambling, going crazy, trying to get a POC wrap up done for a meeting that's happening in a day or two. Tired of the metrics, tired of the value. I hope that a lot of the folks that are listening right now have either been kind of trained in value selling or medic or, some of the other frameworks that are out there. But everything should be driven by the value that your product brings and measured during a technical validation event with metrics that are defensible and tie back to that value, right? Because with those two things, you can start to create a compelling ROI argument, and then iterate on it. This isn't a one size fits all thing. That's kind of why I didn't just hand you guys a template and say, oh yeah, here, use this every time, because it's going to be different for your product, for your sales cycle. Maybe you're something that takes 6 months to sell. Maybe you're selling services, not a software product. This will be different. But the key elements, always tie back to what you're measuring and how that ties to the value that your product brings. And ultimately, the goal is to impress Bob and the CFO, because they don't care about you. They just want to save money. And, but they also want their employees to be happy with the tools and products that they need to be successful. All right. And that's a wrap from a slides perspective. Have
to find the unmute myself button. Okay. It looks like we have a few questions and we've got 7 or so minutes that we can take them. So Hannah wants to know, how do you interpret a POC versus a POV? Is it a quick technical feasibility check and giving first glimpses into product, or are we talking about a 3 to 6 month phase when evaluating SaaS?
That's a good question. Yeah, I mean, like from a POC versus POV perspective, I think I mentioned earlier, I mean, that could be, we could have an hour-long conversation about that. We typically approach ours as a POC because we want to do them quick. We want to show that time to value is important to us. So we aim to do a 2 to 4 week technical validation event. When you start talking about like a longer term evaluation, I mean, I've worked at SaaS companies in the past, and I've definitely have done this before. But that definitely, there's a lot more babysitting that needs to be done at that point, and you're constantly measuring and constantly trying to calculate the success metrics. So yeah, I guess maybe from a question perspective, if this is a POC versus a POV, like I said, that's a much deeper conversation, a much longer chat.
We could have a whole other session about that. In fact, I think there actually might have been, Hannah, yesterday we actually had a POC versus a POV session. So on Thursday, when the recordings are available, if you go track that one down, that may be a good one to distinguish the differences. Okay, Chris wants to know, knowing that the wrap-up deck contains more than the POC results, is this an asset or resource that sales should own creating, with a section for the POC results?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when I look at sales, like that includes the AEs, the SEs, so like the technical pre-sales folks and the account executives. So it's absolutely something that sales should own. If the question's more around kind of the divide between, does the AE own it, does the SE own it? I'm in the camp that the SE should own it, right? And obviously, like the AE would be on the hook to kind of shepherd the information into it, right? For the 4-box piece, the future state, the timelines, the conversations, could the less kind of hands or boots on the ground POC work. But it should be collaborative, right? I always strive to have like really great synergy between my SE teams and the AE teams. So it should be something that both just know, right? That this is something I need to do, something I have to do, and I'm going to do it this way. And if you're in like a technical pre-sales leadership role, this is absolutely something that you could start to talk to, your CRO or VP of sales about, let's make this, a 50-50 share of responsibility. There are scenarios though, like we're doing a POC right now where our core engineering team is actually on the hook to do a big piece of it, because it's something that isn't, we just put on the roadmap, right? But it's some alpha level integration code. So in those scenarios, it's absolutely imperative that kind of sales owns that document, because a lot of the core engineering team, they're great at what they do, but they're not salespeople, right? So we got to make sure that we are iterating, what our value is throughout the whole process.
Absolutely. And I think you kind of answered this one. If you're on a super short turnaround time to deliver a wrap up, do you see like an MVP version of what you're suggesting working, or should we put in the extra time or ask for a little more time to fit all of this in? I know you mentioned that this is kind of like a living document throughout the whole POC.
Yeah. I mean, look, don't ever slow down a deal. Like if someone's ready to buy and it's super short turnaround, at that point, it's fine to escape process a bit. I think from an MVP perspective, and this could even equate or could even be relevant for like a product-led growth approach, or even like a smaller, more transactional deal that it's not a full-on POC. It's just kind of a quick trial. They've accepted that this is the right product for them. But you still should give back to your prospect some level of proof, right? This is the value. This is how we measured it. This is the exercise that we did. And that might just be a couple slides with the use case journey, or it may even just be a completed POC plan, right? Maybe it's that spreadsheet, but with, a notes column talking about why this is important. This satisfied your desire to have, 30% reduction in Azure spend, or whatever the metrics were that you're trying to help your prospect meet. But yeah, and that's part of why I was reiterating that you got to make it your own. You got to be iterative with this as well, right? And figure out what works best. But yeah, shorter sales cycle, smaller value, a smaller dollar amount deal. Maybe it's, if you have a director of engineering that has buying power up to 50K, and you don't have to worry about Bob or the CFO, the completed spreadsheet might be enough, but figure out what is enough early, right? Early in the sales cycle. You should be asking those questions. Yeah.
Yeah. Figure out what they want and what they're looking for, like you mentioned at the very beginning, and then go.
Yeah. I mean, we could do a whole session on MEDDIC too. Like one of the D's is the decision process and decision criteria, right? So if you know that decision process and you know what boxes need to be checked for them to make a purchase, and it's a 75K deal, and the person you're working with directly has buying authority up to like 100K, then yeah, you're not selling to Bob anymore. You're selling to, Lisa, the engineer that you're working with.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Well, thank you so much. Do you mind if I steal the screen share back?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Let me hop off here.
Just want to make sure that y'all know with the minute-ish we have left before we end today. We love our virtual conference, but we also love being able to take it on the road and be in person with all of you. So I want to make sure that you are all aware of Demo Fest taking place in both London and the UK. You can register for either of these events at demofest.com or at the link in the docs tab on the right of your screen. We also go check out the expo hall that's in the booths. There's a lot of great people, a lot of great partners who have contributed to this. And as a reminder, there's been no money exchanged for this event. So they've really gone above and beyond to help make this event what it is. And For the last session today, we've got our closing keynote with Jim Hogan, and we also have some exciting announcements from our product team, so stay tuned. Thank you so much, Dwayne, for the amazing insight on POCs, and thank you all so much for joining. We'll see you on the next one.
All right. Thank you.